Hi, good day. This is Michael from Asia Virtual Solutions. In this video, we'll be taking a look at submission settings for GSA Search Engine Ranker. The submission settings is basically under the options, and then you have submissions here. The first is the default one is submissions. So there's quite a few settings here that we need to look at. Normally the threads is how many threads you'll be running, and this is basically determined by the number of proxies you have. So let me just create something open here. Normally we'll calculate this on a 1 to 10 basis. What that means is if you got one proxy, then you can run 10 threads. If you got 10 proxies, you can run 100 threads. If you have 50 proxies, then you can run 500 threads. Okay, so I'm not going to go higher than that, because anything higher than 500 I think is a bit crazy. And it just causes bottlenecks. So you don't want to go too high. You don't want to run this 1,000 threads, because these days things have to be solved, captchas have to be solved, you have to connect to proxies, and if you run it 1,000 threads, you are abusing your proxies and you are causing bottlenecks, because the captcha solvers cannot solve, so it captures at 1,000 threads. It's too much. You will get there will be in a queue for getting solved. GSA capture breaker, for instance, basic image capture, it's never going to be able to solve the captures fast enough if you're running at 1,000 threads. So things will get to really slow, poor success rate if you run so high. I would say it should be based on your resources, what kind of CPU you have, and what kind of memory you have on the machine. You should not get less than 3 GB of memory, and for the CPU you need the most powerful CPU you can get. For instance, let's look at the Asia Virtual Solution VPS that we provide with our GSA VPS package. If I can just find this now, give me a second. You can buy a cheap, you can get a cheap VPS, and it will say, okay, you got 2 cores or 3 cores of the CPU, but they never tell you what CPU that it is they're using. Is it a cheap CPU, or are we talking about a quality CPU? So let's look at these specs. Get it bigger. So you got 10 virtual CPU, and this is running on AMD EPYC servers, which cost over several thousand dollars for just one CPU. You got 12 GB of RAM, so these are powerful enough. So with this you can run a lot of threads in GSA Search Engine Ranker. But let's say I would recommend you to run at about 300 threads. That way the capture solvers is going to be able to keep up, and your proxies are not going to get burned. So this based also on the number of memory available and the number of projects you have. For instance, let me show you, let me just close this stuff here. Let's look at this VPS that of mine. So here we got 167 projects. I'm never going to be able to run all of them at the same time. On the moment, it's actually this 170 project over here that is active. And we can see it's running 84 threads, 104 threads, and I have it set at what? 500 threads. But you look how many proxies I have. I have 804 dedicated proxies. But I do not have so many projects. If I had all these projects active and I start GSA Search Engine Ranker, it's going to crash because it will be going over 3.5 gigabyte of memory. So even though this VPS might have 12 gigabyte of memory, this GSA program is a 32-bit program. I have another post that gives you more information about 32-bit programs, but this 32-bit program, GSA Search Engine Ranker, will never be able to go over 3.5 gigabyte of memory. That's just how it's coded. It's a 32-bit encoding. So if it was 64-bit, you would have been able to consume a lot more memory. So this being a 32-bit and not a 64-bit program, we need to make sure that our memory never go over 3.5, because if it goes over 3.5, there's going to be a pop-up here that says out of memory, reduce resources or stop whatever to make adjustments. The same with the CPU. Luckily we got a very powerful CPU, so the probability of getting filling up the CPU is almost none. But you're going to run out of memory if I make all of these projects active and start them all at the same time. It's going to crash the whole thing. So what we do is we set this, close this. We make use of these two things here. This is what we call the auto throttle. It automatically decreases the threads, or it automatically increases the thread. So I set it at 300, okay? But let's say my machine is now running and it's consuming a lot of CPU and it's coming near 80% of the CPU usage. Then this is going to automatically then reduce the number of threads, so it doesn't go over 80% CPU usage. Also, if the memory gets to 3 gigabyte of memory, it's automatically going to reduce the threads until the memory usage is below 3000. And then once it's below, it will let it go again, and then if it gets too high again, it automatically. It's the same as a car. You know, modern cars got what they call adaptive cruise control. This works on the same principle. If the CPU and the memory is low, no problem, it will run until 300 threads. But while it's at 300 threads and there's maybe some heavy processes that needs to do, and the memory goes up and over 3000 megabyte, then it automatically will decrease. So this is really important to set this, especially if you're on a cheap VPS, or if you have limited memory. Say you only got 2 or 3 or 4 gigabyte of memory, then you don't want to fill it up, because Windows also need memory still. So if you're on a powerful VPS, this is what you want to set it at. But if you don't even have 3 gigabyte of memory, then you want to maybe reduce this so you don't go over the number of memory you have, or over this 2.9 gigabyte. Why do I set it at 2.9 and not 3.5? Because I told you the 32-bit can handle up to 3.5. Think of it this way. You don't want to, if you're driving, you don't want to drive it, if the speed limit is 350 kilometers an hour, you're not going to drive it until you get to 350 kilometers an hour and then slow down, especially when you're on a mountain road or something. So you need to slow down, or you're going uphill, you're not going to get 350. Or there's a lot of obstacles in the road, then you reduce the speed. So same with this, if you're on the highway and there's cars in front of you, the adaptive speed controls can automatically slow you down, like a Tesla. If it's driving in traffic and you set it to drive at 200 kilometers an hour, but it's in traffic and it cannot drive 200 kilometers there, then it's going to automatically reduce the speed. And then when the road opens up again, it will again then speed up until it gets to the desired speed that was set. So this is a very important setting, especially for low budget VPSs. I will set this on a budget VPS, I'll just set this even lower than 2.9. And same with the CPU, but for this, I've never in 10 years pulled up the CPU, but in memory, we cannot go over 3.5. So even though the VPS has got 12 gigabyte of memory, this specific program is not going to be able to use more than 3.5. And we can't set this to slow it down at 3.5, because when we get to 3.5, that's already too late. It's like a train, you need time to slow down. So we say, okay, when you're running, slow down, take your foot off the pedal when you get to 2009. So it's going to go maybe 2009, 3000, 3001, and then only it will slowly start coming down until below 2.9. When it gets to maybe say 2.8, 2.7, it will again accelerate, speed up again. HTML timeout. If you just have one project here, no problem, this can be even lower, maybe 120. But if you have a lot of projects running, and especially if you're running at high threads, this is like when you open a lot of browsers on your computer. The more browsers you open, the slower it gets. So same with this, but what I found is like anywhere between 120 and 160 is a sweet spot. I'm being conservative, I set it at 160. But if you have many projects, then you can even put it higher, because it takes time. If you got 200 projects and they're all active, that's 200 connections that the program have to make, and it will take some time to load those pages. So this is basically to say, if the page takes longer than 160 seconds to load, then drop it. Then it will drop that page. So we can keep it at 120. The bandwidth we should not really have to worry about, unless you're on your home computer or where you have very little bandwidth, then you can restrict the bandwidth not to use too much. But most VPSs these days, they don't really have a limit on bandwidth that much. The rest here is just proxy settings, so we're not going to look at the proxy settings. What other options are there? Let me go back to that VPS with all the projects running here. Come on. This, no, not this one, sorry. Okay, so here we have, say I want all of these projects to be active. But I know it's going to be a big problem, because even if I set that submission adaptive control here, even if I set this like it is set here, it's still it's impossible to run 164 projects, especially at 500 threads. It's gonna, within a few seconds it will crash, and it will say out of memory, please stop to reduce the number of threads. So how do we get around? How can we say I really want to run all of this? I cannot just run one project at a time. So in that case, let me just close this here. There's another option. We can make all of these active, but we go to, when we start, let me just stop it first. I'm going to stop that, and what we have to wait for it to stop, so let's give it a minute. So instead of now just clicking start again, so if all of these are active, a better way to do is, we want all of them active, but not every single one have to submit at the same time. We can maybe say do 20 or 30 at a time, and then after say a half an hour we change to another 30, and then after half an hour another 30, and like that all day, so it goes in a loop. To set it like that, you go to the drop down next to the start and use this one. So with this we're selecting all with status active, because maybe some projects you don't want active, you deactivate, set them to inactive. Also, if, like for instance, let me open this one. This one has got a limit. So you see I got to stop, because this project I want to create 30,000 links on every tier. So I set it to 31,000 verifications. When it reaches 31,000 verifications, it's going to make that project as a P. There will be the status will change to active, but P. You see like that there, active P, means it's paused. It's active, but it's paused. That's why when we then select this one, select with active status, but if it's paused, it's going to skip it until it's no longer paused. So what you do is you click that one, and then you can say, okay, we have to play with this, but I found like between 20 and 30 is a good number. So let's say 20. We want to run 20 projects, and then every half an hour we wanted to change to 20 different projects. So it's not the same 20 projects that run all the time. It's going to say run this 20, and then later on it will run another 20, and it's going to be random which 20 is run. But it's going to continuously rotate 20 different projects, 20 different projects, 20 all the time. And we will say if it's active pause, stop those, don't use those, active pause. Because it's paused for a reason, so we don't want the ones that's paused to run. So even if it's active, if it's paused, skip it until it's become only active and no longer paused. Those ones that has got a limit that I showed you, just we want say 30,000 links in a day. If I set that to pause the project when it reaches 30,000 verified links a day, so it will be active pause, and then after one day it will automatically restart again, and it will be active again, no longer pause. But while it's on pause, it shouldn't run. So this you have to play with. So you have to, when you set it like this, you need to keep an eye on the memory and an eye on the CPU down here. So if you see your memory is getting close to 3 GB, then you know you're running too many projects, and then you should rather reduce that maybe to say 15 projects, and then you see, okay, the memory now settled down, it doesn't go over 2.9 gigabytes, so you know that's a sweet spot. Or if you set it at 15 and you say, oh, okay, the memory is only using 1.5 gigabyte, then okay, you can increase it maybe by 5 and let it run. And then if you see, okay, the memory is not going up, it's still very low, then you can increase it a little bit further, then another 5. Take it up a little bit steps at a time, and then keep an eye on the memory and also on the CPU. The CPU you don't want to go over 80%, and the memory doesn't want to go over 2,900 or 2.9 gigabyte. If it gets to 2.9, it's too much, then you have to lower this. But this now is going to rotate through all your projects. So So if you got like 1,000 projects, you can keep adding here. You can keep adding projects to this GSA. You can have 1,000 projects added here, but we're not going to run all 1,000 at a time. We're going to run 25 at a time and auto rotate every 30 minutes. You can make it short, rotate every hour or every 5 minutes. For me, I like 30 minutes. It gives time to run the project, do verification, etc. I don't really use if you wanted to run only between certain times, then you can use this, but I never really used to run it only at certain times. So yeah, that's it. So that's how we work with the submission settings. So keep an eye on this. Do not run more threads than what you have proxies for multiply by 10 here. So you see I have 795 dedicated proxies. So in theory I can run 7,000 threads with that, but we don't want to run the threads too high. If I run the threads too high, my X-Evil here is going to have a hard time, because you see it will show the queue. Because if I send too many to the capture, it's going to go in a queue, because I are limited at 400 threads, X-Evil. So we want to see there's a queue. We don't want a queue. So that way we need to make sure that this stretch is not too high. 500 is really a little bit high, but this is a powerful VPS that I'm using here. Actually, it's a dedicated server, not a VPS. And I've got a very powerful CPU on this server. It's not a VPS. But normally, if it's on a VPS, I will run maybe 200 to 300 only. Okay, so I hope this gives you a little bit better understanding of threads, and this I call it auto throttle, adaptive throttle control, this part here. And obviously you have to make sure that you got good proxies as well. Okay, if you have questions, or maybe you need help in setting your own GSA auto throttle settings, or you want to discuss this, feel free to drop a comment or contact me. I'll be happy to help you with your settings for your VPS. Okay, thanks and have a good day.